The boss's daughter froze when she saw her missing sister's ring on the waitress's hand. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Hope Garden, casting golden streaks across the polished marble floors. Laura Bennett moved between the tables with practiced grace, her hands steady as she balanced a tray loaded with crystal water glasses. The restaurant hummed with the quiet murmur of expensive conversations, business deals sealed over medium-rare steaks, anniversary celebrations marked by champagne that cost more than her weekly rent. She'd worked here for 3 years now, long enough to become invisible. That's what servers were supposed to be, after all. Ghosts in black vests and white shirts, appearing only when needed, vanishing the moment a fork was set down or a wine glass needed refilling. Laura didn't mind being invisible. It was safer that way. At 25, she'd learned that drawing attention meant answering questions she couldn't answer. Where are you from? Who are your parents? What's your story? Questions that led to dead ends and awkward silences, to the same painful admission she'd been making since she was old enough to understand what it meant. I don't know. She glanced down at her right hand as she set a glass of sparkling water before an elderly woman dripping in pearls. The small silver ring caught the light, an amethyst heart that had been on her finger for as long as she could remember. Grace had told her it was the only thing she'd had when they found her. Grace. The thought of her brought the familiar ache, the kind woman who'd taken in a lost 5-year-old wandering alone through a Philadelphia bus station, confused and crying. With no memory of how she'd gotten there or who she belonged to, Grace had tried everything. Police reports, missing children databases, news appeals, nothing. It was as if little Laura had simply appeared out of thin air. "Miss, excuse me, miss." Laura snapped back to the present. The woman in pearls was holding up her menu expectantly. "I'm so sorry. What can I get for you?" As she took the order, she was vaguely aware of the restaurant's entrance door opening, of the hostess greeting new arrivals. Nothing unusual. It was Thursday afternoon, and Hope Garden was always busy on Thursdays. She didn't notice the young woman who just walked in. Not yet. Natalie Holloway stepped into the cool elegance of Hope Garden with her best friend Maya, chattering beside her about some gallery opening next week. Natalie nodded absently, her mind elsewhere. It had been one of those mornings, the kind where the weight of everything felt heavier than usual. 20 years since Hannah vanished. Every year on the anniversary, her father would lock himself in his study, and Natalie would find herself staring at old photographs, trying to remember the sister who'd been torn from her life before she was old enough to truly understand what forever meant. "Nat, you okay?" Maya was looking at her with concern. Natalie forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." They followed the hostess to a table by the window. The view overlooked a small courtyard garden. Ironic, given the restaurant's name. Natalie pulled out her chair, her fingers absently touching the silver ring on her right hand. The amethyst heart gleamed in the afternoon light. She'd never taken it off, not once in 20 years. "Good afternoon, ladies. Can I start you off with something to drink?" The voice was pleasant, professional, nothing remarkable about it. Natalie glanced up to respond, and the world stopped. The server standing beside their table had her face. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical. The same green eyes, the same delicate arch of eyebrows, the same small beauty mark just above the left corner of the mouth. Even the way she held her head, slightly tilted, was like looking into a mirror. But it wasn't the face that made Natalie's heart slam against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack. It was the ring. The server's right hand rested lightly on her order pad, and there, catching the afternoon sun, was an amethyst ring, a heart-shaped amethyst set in silver, identical to the one Natalie wore. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Spring afternoon, warm sun on her face, the garden behind the Holloway mansion in full bloom. She's 5 years old, and Hannah is beside her, and Daddy is kneeling between them, his face serious but kind. "These rings are special, my princesses. I had them made just for you. There are only 2 like them in the entire world," Hannah had squealed with delight. Slipping hers on immediately, Natalie had done the same. They'd held hands, admiring how the amethysts caught the light. "You're twins," Daddy had said, pulling them both into a hug. "2 parts of one soul. These rings will always remind you of that. No matter what happens, you'll always have each other." 3 hours later, Hannah was gone. "Miss, Are you all right? The server, the woman with her face, with Hannah's ring, was leaning forward slightly, concerned. Maya had gone quiet, looking between them with wide eyes. Natalie tried to speak. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her hands were shaking. The restaurant swam in her vision. This wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible. Hannah was gone. She'd been gone for 20 years. The investigators had found nothing. Nothing. Her mother had died believing she'd never see her daughter again. But the ring. That ring. Natalie's voice came out as a whisper. She cleared her throat. Tried again. I'm sorry. I need to. Excuse me. She stood so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. Other diners turned to look. She didn't care. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Maya called after her. But Natalie was already moving toward the exit. Her vision tunneling, heart racing. Outside, the New York afternoon assaulted her with noise and motion. Cars honked. People rushed past. Natalie leaned against the building's brick facade, gasping for air. Her phone. She needed her phone. With trembling fingers, she pulled it from her purse and scrolled through her contacts. Her father's name appeared. Thomas Holloway. She pressed call before she could second-guess herself. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that familiar tone of careful control, the tone he'd perfected over 20 years of running a hotel empire while nursing a broken heart. Natalie, is everything okay? Dad, her voice cracked. I need you to come to Hope Garden, the restaurant on 5th and... I know where it is. What's wrong? How could she possibly explain this? How could she put into words what she'd just seen? It's about Hannah, Dad. Silence. Long and terrible then, barely above a whisper. What did you say? Just come, please, I think... She squeezed her eyes shut. I think I found her. Inside Hope Garden, Laura stood frozen by the window table, order pad still in hand. The beautiful woman who'd looked at her as if she'd seen a ghost had just run out. Her companion, a petite brunette, was gathering her things with apologetic glances at Laura. I'm so sorry, the brunette said quickly. She's not feeling well. We'll come back another time. Laura nodded numbly and watched her leave. What had just happened? The manager, Robert, appeared at her elbow. Everything okay? Yeah, I think so. She just felt sick suddenly. But as Laura returned to her other tables, she couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had shifted. The way that woman had stared at her. The look in her eyes. Recognition mixed with terror. Hope mixed with disbelief. And strangest of all, Laura had felt it too. That jolt of familiarity when their eyes met. Like looking at someone she should know but didn't. She glanced down at her ring again. The amethyst heart winking in the light. 2 hours later, as Laura was refilling coffee for a businessman absorbed in his laptop, she became aware of someone standing at the hostess station. Not just someone. 2 people. A tall, distinguished man in his late 40s with silver-touched dark hair and an expensive suit, and beside him, the woman from earlier. They were both staring directly at her. The businessman said something about cream, but Laura barely heard him. She was locked in the gaze of the older man, and in his eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Hope. Desperate. Terrifying hope. The hostess was speaking to them, gesturing toward an empty table, but they weren't moving. The man said something, and the hostess's eyes widened. She looked toward Laura, then back at them, then hurried toward the kitchen where Robert was likely reviewing receipts. Laura's hands had started to shake. She set down the coffee pot carefully before she could drop it. They were coming toward her now, weaving between tables. Other servers stepped aside, sensing something significant happening. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade into background static. When they stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the fine lines around the man's eyes and the barely contained emotion on the woman's face, Laura found her voice. Can I help you? The words came out steadier than she felt. The man's eyes traveled from her face to her hand, to the ring she wore. His face went pale. The woman beside him inhaled sharply, as if confirming what she already knew. That ring, the man said, his voice rough with emotion. Where did you get it? The name hung in the air between them like something fragile and sacred. Hannah, Laura's manager, Robert, appeared suddenly at her side, his expression caught between concern and confusion. Laura, is everything all right here? She couldn't answer, couldn't form words. The photograph on the phone screen seemed to pulse with impossible truth. 2 identical little girls, one of whom might be her. Thomas Holloway straightened, composing himself with visible effort. Despite his obvious emotional turmoil, authority radiated from him naturally. "I apologize for the disruption. I'm Thomas Holloway. This is my daughter. Natalie, we need to speak with Laura privately if that's possible." Robert's eyes widened at the name. Everyone in New York knew the Holloways. Hotel empire, society pages, wealth that spanned generations. "Of course, Mr. Holloway. You can use the private dining room upstairs." Minutes later, Laura found herself seated at an intimate table in a room she'd only glimpsed while carrying trays past its closed doors. Natalie sat across from her, still crying silently. Thomas paced near the window, one hand pressed against the glass as if anchoring himself to something solid. "I don't understand," Laura finally managed. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "You think I'm your daughter? That I'm her?" She gestured at the phone still clutched in Thomas's other hand. Thomas turned from the window, up close. The resemblance between him and Natalie was clear. Same strong jawline, same intense eyes, but those eyes were red-rimmed now, decades of grief threatening to spill over. 20 years ago, he began, his voice carefully controlled. "I took my twin daughters to Central Park, a beautiful spring day. Hannah wanted to see the street performers near Bethesda Fountain. I was watching them. I swear I was watching. But there were so many people, artists, musicians, tourists. I turned to buy them ice cream, and when I looked back, he couldn't finish." Natalie took over, her voice thick with tears. "Hannah was gone, just vanished. Dad spent millions on private investigators, hired every expert, offered rewards. The police searched for months. We had her picture on every news station in the country." She wiped her eyes. "Mom never recovered. She died 3 years later. The doctors said heart failure, but Dad and I knew. She died of a broken heart." Laura's hands were trembling. She folded them in her lap, the amethyst ring pressing into her palm. "But how can you be sure it's me? Lots of people look alike. The ring could be a coincidence." "Look at us," Natalie interrupted, leaning forward. "Really look. We're not just similar, Laura. We're identical. And that ring. Dad had those custom made by a jeweler in Amsterdam. Only 2 exist in the world. He gave them to us that morning before we went to the park." Thomas sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 48 years. "Tell us about when you were found, everything you remember." Laura took a shaky breath. She'd told this story before. To social workers, to therapists Grace had taken her to the few close friends who'd asked, but never had it felt so weighted with consequence. "I don't remember anything before the bus station. My first clear memory is sitting on a bench in Philadelphia, confused and scared. I was clutching this ring, and I knew it was important, but I couldn't remember why. An elderly woman named Grace found me crying. She took me to the police, and they didn't find anything." Thomas's knuckles were white where he gripped the table edge. "Nothing. No missing person report matched me. No one came forward. It was like I didn't exist before that day." Laura's throat tightened. "Grace waited the required time, then took me in. She tried for years to find out where I came from, but every lead went nowhere. Eventually, we just stopped looking." "Philadelphia," Thomas murmured. "That's what the investigators said too. They tracked possible sightings to Philadelphia, but the trail went cold." Natalie pulled out her own phone, scrolling quickly. "When's your birthday, Laura?" "I don't know my real one. Grace chose April 15th because that's when she found me. The doctors estimated I was about 5. We were born April 2nd, Natalie said. Turning her phone around, on the screen was what looked like a birth certificate. "Hannah and I, 20 years ago." The math worked. The age worked. Everything worked except the impossibility of it all. "This is insane," Laura whispered. "Things like this don't happen. People don't just find each other after 20 years. They do if they're meant to," Natalie said softly. She reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Laura's hand. "I know this is overwhelming. Trust me, I'm barely holding it together myself. But we can know for sure, a DNA test. It would tell us definitively." Laura jerked back slightly. A DNA test. Thomas leaned forward. I understand this is a lot. You don't know us. You have no reason to trust us, but Natalie's right. A test would give us certainty. For all of us. And if it's not me, Laura heard herself ask. If I'm not Hannah, then what? You've gotten your hopes up for nothing. And She stopped, unsure how to finish. What would she have lost? The fantasy that she might actually belong somewhere. Then at least we'll know, Thomas said quietly. And if you're not Hannah, I'd still like to help you find out who you are. Anyone who's been searching as long as you have deserves answers. Something in his voice, genuine compassion beneath the desperation, made Laura's defenses crack slightly. This man had lost a daughter. He'd spent 20 years in that particular hell. Who was she to deny him this chance, however remote? Okay, she said. I'll do the test. Natalie's face transformed with relief and hope. Really? But I need you to understand something. Laura met both their eyes. I'm not her. I can't be. Because if I am, that means 20 years of my life, Grace's life, was built on a tragedy. It means I was stolen, that someone took me, and I can't. Her voice broke. I can't let myself believe that until I know for sure. Fair enough, Thomas said, though she could see it cost him to maintain that careful neutrality. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, writing something on the back. This is the number for my personal physician. He can arrange the DNA test discreetly. Quickly. Can you go tomorrow? Laura took the card, the expensive paper stock foreign in her calloused hands. I work tomorrow. I'll make it worth your while, Thomas said immediately. Whatever you'd earn in a day, I'll compensate. I don't want your money, Laura interrupted, surprising herself with the sharpness. I just need to arrange coverage for my shift. Respect flickered in Thomas's eyes. Of course, I apologize. An awkward silence fell. There was so much to say and no way to say it. Finally, Natalie stood. We should let you get back to work. But Laura, she hesitated, then continued. Can I give you my number in case you want to talk before tomorrow? Or if you have questions or... She trailed off helplessly. Sure. Laura pulled out her phone, a cheap model with a cracked screen. She entered Natalie's number as the other woman recited it. As they walked toward the door, Thomas paused. One more thing. Do you have any other memories? Dreams, maybe? Anything that feels like it might be from before? Laura considered lying, but something in his face, the raw hope barely contained, made her honest. Sometimes I dream about a garden. There's a fountain and flowers everywhere. Someone's laughing. A girl who sounds like me. She touched her ring unconsciously. And I remember this. Someone important, giving it to me. Thomas's composure finally cracked. He turned away, shoulders shaking. Natalie moved to him, wrapping her arms around her father. That's our garden, she whispered. At the estate. We played there every day. Laura felt something vast and terrifying opening inside her chest. I should go. My shift. Of course. Natalie released her father, wiping her eyes. Tomorrow then. Tomorrow. Laura fled the private dining room, her heart hammering. She made it to the staff bathroom before the shaking started in earnest, gripping the sink. She stared at her reflection, really looked at herself for the first time in years. Green eyes, sharp cheekbones, the beauty mark, features she'd never questioned because they'd always just been hers. Were they someone else's first? She thought of Grace, who'd raised her with such love despite having no obligation. Grace, who died 2 years ago, taking whatever secrets she might have known to the grave. Had Grace suspected? Had she known more than she'd said? The bathroom door opened. Another server. Maria stuck her head in. Laura, you okay? Robert's asking about table 7. Yeah. Laura straightened, splashing cold water on her face. Yeah, I'm fine. Tell him I'll be right there. But as she returned to the floor, moving through familiar motions with automatic precision, she felt eyes on her, glancing toward the window. She saw a woman in an expensive suit watching from across the street. Their eyes met briefly before the woman turned and disappeared into the crowd. Something about her gaze sent a chill down Laura's spine. It wasn't curiosity, it was calculation. And underneath that, something that looked almost like fear. The DNA test took less than 15 minutes. a simple cheek swab in Dr. Morrison's pristine Upper East Side office. Thomas standing nearby with hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The doctor had been professional, kind even, but Laura had felt like a specimen under examination, something to be analyzed, categorized, proven or disproven. Results in 3 to 5 business days, Dr. Morrison had said, sealing the samples with clinical efficiency. 3 to 5 days? It sounded reasonable in theory. In practice, it felt like an eternity. That was 4 days ago. Now Laura stood at the Hope Garden bar, polishing wine glasses that didn't need polishing, trying to ignore the way her phone burned in her pocket. She'd checked it 17 times in the last hour. No messages, no calls, just the background photo of her and Grace at Coney Island 3 summers ago, both grinning at the camera with cotton candy-stained lips. "You're going to rub a hole through that glass." Maria's voice made Laura jump. Her co-worker leaned against the bar, eyebrow raised. "What's going on with you? You've been weird all week." "Nothing, just tired." "Uh-huh." Maria didn't look convinced. "Does this have anything to do with that rich guy and his daughter who came in? The ones you disappeared with for like an hour?" Before Laura could answer, her phone buzzed. She nearly dropped the wine glass fishing it out. "Natalie, can I come by the restaurant after your shift? Just to talk." It was the 5th text Natalie had sent this week. The woman was persistent. Laura had to give her that. The first day, she'd just sent a simple, "How are you?" The second, she'd shared a childhood photo of her and Hannah, them, at a birthday party yesterday. It had been a longer message about how she couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything else. Laura had responded to each one, brief but polite. What else could she do? Ignore the woman who might be her twin sister. Laura, "Sure, I'm off at 9. See?" Maria gestured at the phone. "That face right there. That's not a nothing face." Laura sighed. Maria had been working at Hope Garden for 5 years, had been there when Laura started, had covered her shifts when Grace got sick. If anyone deserved some version of the truth, it was her. Remember those people? Turns out they think I might be related to them. We're waiting on test results. Maria's eyes went wide. Related? Like how related? Like their missing daughter related? Holy shit. Maria grabbed Laura's arm. "The Holloways. You might be a Holloway." "Laura, do you know how rich they are? Like stupid rich. Private jet rich." "It's probably nothing," Laura said quickly, though her heart didn't believe it. Not anymore. Not after 4 days of Natalie's texts, each one revealing another small similarity. They both hated cilantro. Both had recurring nightmares about water. Both touched their right earlobe when nervous. Twin things. Or coincidences. Laura didn't know which scared her more. The dinner rush started, mercifully cutting the conversation short. Laura threw herself into work, grateful for the distraction. Take orders, deliver food, smile, repeat. Normal, familiar, safe. At 8:47, her phone buzzed again. Her heart jumped, but it was just Natalie confirming she was on her way. At 8:53, it buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. Laura almost ignored it, but something made her look. Unknown. You don't belong in that world. Walk away while you still can. Laura's blood went cold. She read it again, then again. Who would send this? She started to type a response, then stopped. What would she even say? "Laura," Robert appeared at her elbow. "You've got a visitor. She's waiting in the lobby." Natalie stood near the hostess stand, looking somehow both elegant and anxious in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. Her eyes lit up when she saw Laura. "Hey," Natalie said softly. "Sorry to bother you at work again. I can't sit in that apartment anymore. You know, Dad's pacing holes in the carpet and I'm going crazy." "It's fine." Laura glanced at Robert, who nodded permission, then led Natalie to a quiet corner booth. "Want anything, coffee?" "God, yes, please." Laura returned with 2 cups, sliding into the seat across from Natalie. Up close, the resemblance was still jarring, like looking at a glossier, better rested version of herself. "Any word?" Natalie asked, though her face said she already knew the answer. "Not yet," Dr. Morrison said, "by tomorrow at the latest." "Tomorrow?" Natalie wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. I don't know if I want tomorrow to come or never come. Does that make sense? Yeah, Laura understood perfectly. Tomorrow meant certainty, and certainty meant no more living in the comfortable space of maybe. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Natalie pulled out her phone. Can I show you something? She scrolled through photos, stopping on one that made Laura's breath catch. 2 little girls, maybe 3 years old, in matching swimsuits, playing in a fountain. They were laughing, water streaming down their faces, absolutely identical. This was at the estate, Natalie said quietly. We did this every summer. Mom would get so mad because we'd track water all through the house. Her voice cracked slightly. After Hannah disappeared, they drained the fountain. Dad couldn't stand to look at it. Laura stared at the photo. One of those little girls was Natalie. Was the other one her? Had she splashed in that fountain? Laughed that laugh? Lived that life? Do you remember any of it? Natalie asked. Anything at all. I told your father. Sometimes I dream about a garden, but I don't know if they're real memories or just my brain trying to fill in the blanks. What's the garden like? In the dreams, Laura closed her eyes, reaching for the fragments. There's a stone path, rose bushes, pink ones, a bench under a big tree, and someone singing. I can never quite hear the words, but the melody. She hummed a few bars without thinking. Natalie's face went white. That's it. That's the song. What? Mom used to sing that to us, every night before bed. It's an old French lullaby her grandmother taught her. Natalie's hands were shaking now. Laura, you couldn't know that. There's no way you could know that unless I heard it before, Laura finished. Her own hands trembling, the weight of it crashed over her. This wasn't just DNA and test results anymore. This was memories she shouldn't have, melodies she couldn't explain, a garden that felt more real than any dream had a right to be. I'm scared, Laura admitted, surprising herself. If I'm Hannah, that means someone took me, kept me from you, from your dad, from my mom who died thinking I was dead, and if I'm not... She stopped. If you're not, then I lose you all over again, Natalie finished quietly, before Laura could respond. Her phone buzzed. Both women froze. Laura picked it up with shaking hands. Another unknown number, different from before. Unknown. The test results are in. Dr. Morrison will call tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thought you should know. Thomas. Dad. Natalie breathed, reading over Laura's shoulder. He must have called the lab. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., 15 hours from now. Laura felt like she might throw up. Stay with me tonight, Natalie blurted out. At my apartment. We can wait together unless you think that's weird. Which it totally is. I'm sorry. Okay. Natalie blinked. Really? Yeah. Laura didn't want to be alone tonight. Didn't want to pace her tiny studio apartment, staring at Grace's photo, wondering if her whole life had been built on a lie. But I need to grab some clothes first. An hour later, they were in Natalie's apartment, a sprawling space in Tribeca that probably cost more per month than Laura made in a year. But Natalie didn't give her the grand tour, just led her to the guest room and said, "Make yourself comfortable. I'll be in the living room if you can't sleep." Laura couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., she found Natalie on the couch, also awake, watching old home videos on her laptop. Can't shut your brain off either, Natalie asked. Not even a little bit. Want to watch these with me? They're from before, when Hannah was still around. Laura sat down. On the screen, a younger Thomas was chasing 2 shrieking toddlers around a pool. Their mother, a beautiful woman with kind eyes, was filming, her laughter audible behind the camera. She would have loved you, Natalie said softly. Mom, she never gave up hoping. Even at the end, they watched in silence as the little girls on screen played, fought, hugged, existed in that perfect twin synchronicity that seemed almost supernatural. At 4 a.m., Laura finally asked the question that had been eating at her. That text I got earlier, the threatening one, do you think someone doesn't want me to be Hannah? Natalie tensed. What text? Laura showed her. Natalie's face hardened. I'm forwarding this to Dad. Someone in our circle knows something, and they're scared. Scared of what? Of you coming back. Of what that might mean. Natalie met her eyes. Our family has money, Laura. A lot of it. And when Hannah disappeared, the line of inheritance became a lot simpler. The implication hung heavy between them. You think someone in your family might have... Laura couldn't finish the sentence. It was too horrible. I think, Natalie said carefully, that we should be very careful until we know the truth, and maybe even after. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over the New York skyline. In 6 hours, they would know. Laura's phone buzzed one more time. Unknown. Last warning. Disappear. The call came at exactly 10 a.m. Laura and Natalie were sitting at the kitchen island, untouched coffee growing cold between them, when Laura's phone lit up with Dr. Morrison's number. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Natalie's hand found Laura's, squeezing tight. Laura answered on speaker. Hello, Miss Bennett. This is Dr. Morrison. I have your results. Are you somewhere private where we can talk? I'm with Natalie Holloway. She can hear this. A pause. Very well. The DNA comparison shows a 99.9% match, Miss Bennett. You are biologically related to the Holloway family. You and Natalie are identical twins. The world tilted. Laura heard the words, understood them, but they felt like they were coming from underwater. Natalie made a sound, half sob, half laugh, and pulled Laura into a fierce embrace. Thank you, doctor, Laura managed to say, though her voice sounded miles away. After the call ended, they sat in stunned silence. Then Natalie's phone rang. Thomas? Dad? Natalie said, voice shaking. It's true. She's Hannah. She's really Hannah. Laura could hear Thomas's voice crack through the speaker, could hear him trying and failing to maintain composure. Can I come over? I need to see her, both of you. Of course. He arrived 20 minutes later, still in his suit from an early morning meeting he'd apparently walked out of. When he saw Laura, his face crumpled. Without a word, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. My daughter, he whispered into her hair. My little girl. I looked for you everywhere. I never stopped looking. Laura stood frozen for a moment, then slowly, tentatively, wrapped her arms around him. He smelled like expensive cologne, and something else. Something that tugged at a memory she couldn't quite reach. Safe. He smelled safe. When they finally pulled apart, Thomas wiped his eyes unselfconsciously. I'm sorry. I promised myself I wouldn't fall apart, but... He laughed wetly. 20 years. 20 years of not knowing. What happens now? Laura asked. The question felt impossibly large. Now we figure this out together, Thomas said. But first, I need to know everything about what happened. The police will want to reopen the investigation. Someone took you, Hannah. Laura, she interrupted quietly. I know the DNA says I'm Hannah, but I've been Laura for 20 years. I don't know how to be anyone else. Thomas nodded slowly. Laura then, or both. Whatever feels right to you. Over the next hour, they talked through what they knew. The timeline. Hannah disappeared from Central Park at age 5. Laura appeared in Philadelphia around the same time. Someone had taken her from New York and abandoned her in another city. But who and why? I need to talk to the original investigators, Thomas said, pulling out his phone. See if there were any leads we missed. Anyone suspicious? His phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It's Patricia, my sister-in-law. I should take this. He stepped into the other room. Aunt Patricia, Natalie explained to Laura. My mother's sister. She's been around, especially after Mom died. Something in her tone made Laura look up. You don't like her. I don't trust her, Natalie corrected. Never have. She's always been weird about the family money, about Dad's business. Ethan, her son, is even worse. He's a lawyer now, always talking about estate planning and inheritance law. She shook her head. I'm probably being unfair. Grief makes people act strange. Thomas returned, his expression troubled. Patricia wants to meet you. She heard about the DNA results. News travels fast in certain circles, and she's insisting on a family dinner tonight. Already, Natalie frowned. Dad, maybe we should wait. Laura's barely had time to process. It's okay, Laura said, though her stomach churned. I should meet the family sometime. That evening, Laura stood in front of Natalie's closet, staring at clothes that cost more than her monthly rent. Natalie had insisted on lending her something appropriate for the Holloway estate. You don't have to do this, Natalie said, watching her. "We can cancel. Tell Patricia to wait." "No." Laura pulled out a simple black dress. "If someone in your family had something to do with what happened to me, I want to see their face when they meet me." The Holloway estate was in Westchester, a sprawling property that took Laura's breath away. The mansion was exactly like her dreams. White stone, tall windows, and in the back, visible through the foyer, a garden with pink roses. "Oh my God," Laura breathed, stopping in her tracks. "What?" Thomas turned, concerned. "I know this place. I've seen it. In my dreams, I've walked through that garden." Thomas's eyes filled with tears again. "You played there every day, you and Natalie. That was your favorite place in the world." Inside, a woman waited in the formal living room. Patricia Monroe was elegant in the way only old money could be. Understated jewelry, perfect posture, smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her son Ethan stood beside her, tall and sharp-featured, watching Laura with calculating interest. "So," Patricia said, rising, "the prodigal daughter returns, Thomas. Are you absolutely certain about this? DNA tests can be wrong." "They're not wrong," Thomas said firmly. "Patricia, Ethan, this is Laura, my daughter, Hannah." Patricia's smile tightened. "Of course, how wonderful. And so convenient after all these years." "Convenient," Natalie's voice was sharp. "I simply mean it's quite the coincidence, isn't it? A girl appears out of nowhere, claims to be the long-lost heiress." "I didn't claim anything," Laura interrupted quietly. "They found me." Ethan stepped forward, extending his hand. "Please excuse my mother, this is a shock for all of us." "Welcome back to the family, Laura." His handshake was too firm, his smile too practiced. Laura's skin crawled. Dinner was tense. Patricia asked pointed questions. Where had Laura been living? What did she do for work? Had she known about the Holloways before they contacted her? Each question carried an undertone of accusation. "She was raised by a woman named Grace Bennett," Thomas said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "She had no idea who she was, Patricia. What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm simply being cautious. Eleanor's death nearly destroyed you. I won't watch you be taken advantage of again." "Aunt Patricia," Natalie said coldly, "you're being incredibly rude." "I'm being realistic." Patricia turned to Laura. "You understand, surely. You appear after 20 years with a convenient story and a ring that could have been copied." "The DNA doesn't lie," Thomas said, his voice hard now. "This is my daughter." End of discussion. After dinner, as they prepared to leave, Laura excused herself to find a bathroom. She got lost in the mansion's hallways, eventually finding herself near Thomas's study. The door was ajar, and she heard voices inside, Ethan and Patricia. "Can't let this happen, Mother. If she's really Hannah, she'll inherit half of everything, the hotels, the investments, all of it. I'm aware of the implications." Patricia's voice was low, tense. "We need to discredit her somehow. Find something in her past we can use. What if there's nothing to find? Then we create something." Laura's blood ran cold. She backed away from the door carefully, heart hammering. When she returned to the foyer, Thomas took one look at her face and frowned. "What's wrong?" "Can we go, please?" In the car, she told them what she'd overheard. Natalie's face flushed with anger. "I knew it. I knew Patricia was up to something." Thomas's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm going to look into her finances, see if there's anything unusual." "Dad, what if she—" Natalie stopped, unable to finish. "What if she what?" Laura asked, though ice was already forming in her stomach. "What if she had something to do with your disappearance?" Thomas said quietly. "What if she knew where you were all along?" The next morning, Laura woke to her phone exploding with notifications. Natalie was already in her room, face pale, holding out her own phone. Someone leaked the story to the press. Laura took the phone. The headline made her stomach drop. "Imposter or miracle? Mystery woman claims to be missing Holloway heiress" below it. Photos of Laura from the restaurant. Candid shots that made her look disheveled and suspicious. The article questioned everything. Her background. Her motives. Whether the DNA test could be trusted. Anonymous sources called her a gold digger, a con artist. Laura's own phone buzzed. Unknown number. Unknown. told you to disappear. Now everyone will know you're a fraud. They're trying to destroy me, Laura whispered. They're trying to scare you away, Natalie corrected, jaw set. But we're not going to let them. Dad's already called his lawyers. We're going to fight this. Thomas appeared in the doorway, phone pressed to his ear. I want to know who leaked this. Yes, all of them. I don't care what it costs. He ended the call. Laura, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I should have protected you better. It's not your fault. But Laura felt the weight of it anyway. Her co-workers would see this. Robert would see this. Everyone would think she was some kind of scammer. Her phone rang. An actual call this time, from a blocked number against her better judgment. She answered, Miss Bennett. A man's voice. Unfamiliar. My name is Detective Marcus Chen. I worked the original Holloway case 20 years ago. I heard about the DNA results, and I think we need to talk. There's something about that case that never sat right with me. Laura put him on speaker. What do you mean? Someone interfered with the investigation. Evidence went missing. Witnesses changed their statements. At the time, I thought it was just bureaucratic incompetence, but now, he paused. Now I think someone paid to make sure Hannah Holloway was never found. Detective Chen's words hung in the air like a threat and a promise all at once. Thomas had insisted they meet at the estate, in his private study where he could control the environment. Now, the four of them, Thomas, Natalie, Laura, and the detective, sat around a mahogany table covered in old case files, photographs yellowed with age, newspaper clippings that screamed headlines about a missing child. Chen was older than Laura expected, maybe 60, with gray hair, and the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much. He spread the files out carefully, like they were something precious. I was a junior detective when Hannah disappeared, he began. First major case I ever worked. We had leads initially. Witnesses who saw a man near the fountain around the time she vanished. A street vendor remembered seeing a little girl crying, being led away by someone. We had composite sketches. We had a timeline. We had everything we needed. So what happened? Thomas asked, leaning forward. They disappeared. The sketches, the witness statements, even the vendor himself. He suddenly couldn't remember anything. Said he'd been mistaken. Chen pulled out a faded document. Then there was this. A financial record I found buried in the archived evidence. Someone made a substantial cash withdrawal the day after Hannah disappeared. $50,000. Laura's breath caught. Who? The account belonged to Patricia Monroe. Silence crashed over the room. Natalie grabbed Laura's hand under the table, squeezing so hard it hurt. Thomas had gone very still, the kind of stillness that came before an explosion. You're telling me, Thomas said, his voice dangerously quiet, that my sister-in-law withdrew $50,000 the day after my daughter was taken, and no one thought to investigate that. I tried, Chen said. I wrote a report, flagged it for my supervisor. It disappeared from the file. When I pressed the issue, I was told to focus on other leads. 2 weeks later, I was transferred to a different department. The case went cold shortly after. Someone buried it, Natalie whispered. Someone with enough power to move detectives around and make evidence vanish. Patricia has connections, Thomas said bitterly. Her family's been in New York society for generations. She knows judges, police commissioners, politicians. He looked at Chen. Why are you telling us this now? Because I never forgot. Because that case has haunted me for 20 years. And because when I saw the news about Laura, about Hannah, I knew I had to do something. Chen met Thomas's eyes. Someone needs to answer for what happened, and I think we both know who. Thomas stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Laura watched him struggle with emotions too big for words. Finally, he turned back. I need concrete evidence. If we're going to confront Patricia, if we're going to involve the authorities, I need something more than a suspicious withdrawal and missing witness statements. I've been digging, Chen said. Quietly, off the books. I found the street vendor. Took me weeks, but I found him. He's willing to talk now. Willing to testify that he was paid to recant his statement. And there's more. The man who was seen taking Hannah. I think I know who he was. Laura felt her heart hammering. Who? A private security contractor named Raymond Price. He's done work for several wealthy families, including the Monroes, the kind of work that doesn't make it onto official records. Chen pulled out a photograph, grainy but clear enough. A man, maybe 40 in the photo, with hard eyes and a military bearing. He died 5 years ago. Car accident. Supposedly. But before he died, he made a deathbed confession to a priest. What did he say? Natalie asked. That he'd kidnapped a child for money. That he was supposed to kill her but couldn't go through with it. So he left her somewhere far away. Hoped she'd be found. Hoped she'd have a chance. Chen looked at Laura. He left her at a bus station in Philadelphia. The room spun. Laura gripped the table's edge, trying to breathe. This man, this Raymond Price, had taken her from her family, from her mother who'd died of grief, from her sister who'd grown up alone, and he'd done it for money. Patricia's money. The priest, Thomas said urgently. Will he testify? He's bound by confession confidentiality, but Price wrote a letter, separate from the confession. The priest held on to it, waiting for the right time. Chen pulled a sealed envelope from his briefcase. He gave it to me yesterday, said if Hannah Holloway was really alive, if she'd really come home, then the truth needed to come out. Thomas took the envelope with shaking hands. The paper was aged, the handwriting cramped and desperate. He read aloud, "To whoever finds this, I need someone to know what I did. My name is Raymond Price, and 20 years ago I was hired to kidnap a child named Hannah Holloway from Central Park. I was paid $50,000, half up front, half when the job was done. I was supposed to make her disappear permanently, but when I looked at her, crying and calling for her daddy, I couldn't do it. I'm a lot of things, but I'm not that. So I drove her to Philadelphia and left her at a bus station. I watched from a distance until an old woman found her. Then I collected the rest of my money and tried to forget. But you can't forget something like that. It follows you, haunts you. If you're reading this, it means I'm dead, and maybe that little girl is still out there somewhere. Still alive? I hope she is. I hope she found a good life, better than what she would have had with me, the person who hired me. I won't name them here because I'm a coward, even in death, but they know who they are, and they'll have to live with what they did. At least I tried to give her a chance. God forgive me. P. Thomas's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the letter. She paid someone to kill my daughter. We don't have proof she gave the order, Chen said carefully. Just the withdrawal and Price's vague reference. But we have enough to question her, Natalie said, standing. We have enough to make her squirm. Thomas pulled out his phone. I'm calling a family meeting tonight. Everyone needs to be there. Patricia, Ethan, my attorneys, everyone. Dad, Natalie said carefully. If Patricia realizes we're onto her, she might run. Let her try. Thomas's voice was ice. I want to see her face when I show her this letter. I want to watch her try to explain that withdrawal, and then I want to see her in handcuffs. That evening, the Holloway Estate's formal dining room felt more like a courtroom. Thomas sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 attorneys. Laura and Natalie sat on one side, Chen on the other, and across from them, looking increasingly uncomfortable, sat Patricia and Ethan. This is highly irregular, Thomas, Patricia said, attempting her usual hauteur, dragging us here on such short notice with lawyers present. Someone tried to kill my daughter 20 years ago, Thomas interrupted. Tried to have her murdered for money. You'll forgive me if I'm not concerned about propriety. Patricia's face went carefully blank. That's a very serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. Thomas slid the letter across the table. Read it. Laura watched Patricia's face as she read. The woman was good. Her expression barely changed, but her hands tightened on the paper, knuckles going white. Beside her, Ethan leaned over to read, and his reaction was less controlled. His face went pale. This is absurd, Patricia said finally, voice tight. Some dead criminal's ravings. This proves nothing. It proves someone hired him, Thomas said. And combined with your very convenient $50,000 withdrawal the day after Hannah disappeared, it paints quite a picture. That withdrawal was for renovation work on my home. I have receipts. Receipts can be fabricated. Thomas leaned forward. Detective Chen has found the street vendor who saw Hannah being taken. He's ready to testify that you paid him to change his statement. For the first time, Genuine fear flickered across Patricia's face. That's a lie. Is it? Because it seems like an awful lot of coincidences. Patricia, the money, the witness, the hired contractor who worked for your family, and now Hannah, Laura, is sitting right here, alive, after being abandoned exactly where Price said he left her. Thomas's voice was shaking with rage. Tell me the truth. Did you have my daughter kidnapped? I don't have to listen to this. Patricia stood. Come on, Ethan, we're leaving. Sit down, Thomas said quietly. The command in his voice was absolute. You're not going anywhere until you explain yourself. I don't owe you any explanations. You owe me 20 years. Thomas slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. You owe me my wife, who died believing our daughter was dead. You owe Natalie her twin sister. You owe Laura her childhood. Patricia's composure was cracking. Ethan stood, putting a hand on his mother's shoulder. Mom, maybe you should be quiet, she snapped at him. Then, to Thomas, you have no proof. You have a letter from a dead man and some circumstantial financial records. No prosecutor would touch this. Maybe not, Chen said, speaking for the first time. But I've reopened the case officially as of this morning, which means I can subpoena your financial records, interview everyone you've spoken to in the last 20 years, put your entire life under a microscope, and something tells me we're going to find a lot more than just one suspicious withdrawal. Patricia's face had gone from pale to gray. She sank back into her chair slowly. Why? Laura asked, her voice breaking the tense silence. It was the first time she'd spoken since they'd all sat down. If you did this, why? What did I ever do to you? Patricia looked at her, really looked at her. For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, regret. It was gone too quickly to tell. You existed, she said finally, so quietly they almost didn't hear. You and your sister, 2 heirs instead of 1. My sister married well, had everything handed to her. She stopped. While you what? Thomas demanded. Patricia laughed bitterly. While I watched from the sidelines, Eleanor got the successful husband, the beautiful home, the perfect twin daughters, and Ethan, my brilliant son, would get nothing unless something changed. The admission hung in the air. Ethan had gone completely white. Mom, he whispered, please tell me you didn't. Patricia buried her face in her hands. Patricia's hands trembled as she lowered them from her face. Her perfectly applied makeup had smudged, mascara tracking down her cheeks in dark lines. For the first time since Laura had met her, the woman looked her age. And more, she looked broken. I didn't mean for it to go that far, Patricia whispered. Thomas stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. You didn't mean for it to go that far. What the hell does that mean? Thomas, please. Patricia's voice cracked. Let me explain. Explain. Natalie's voice was sharp as broken glass. You're going to explain why you destroyed our family. Why my mother died heartbroken. Why Laura grew up without us. Ethan had backed away from his mother, his face a mask of horror. Mom, what did you do? Patricia looked around the room, at the attorney's scribbling notes, at Detective Chen's recorder sitting on the table, at the faces of people who would never forgive her. When she spoke again, her voice was hollow. Eleanor always had everything. Growing up, she was the pretty one, the talented one. Our parents adored her when she married you, Thomas. I was happy for her at first. She laughed bitterly. But then I watched her life unfold like a fairy tale while mine fell apart. My husband left me when Ethan was 3. I had to fight for every dollar, every opportunity. And you, she looked at Thomas with something like resentment. You gave Eleanor the world, the hotels, the mansion, the social standing, and then the twins. So you decided to take one of them. Laura's voice was quiet, but it cut through Patricia's rambling like a knife. Patricia flinched. No, I mean, not at first. I just wanted some of what Eleanor had, some security for Ethan. Eleanor was always so generous, always offering to help. But it was charity, pity. I didn't want pity. I wanted what was rightfully. She stopped, seeming to realize how it sounded. Rightfully yours, Thomas finished, his voice dripping with contempt. My money, my family, my children. I was family. Patricia's voice rose. Eleanor's sister. But I was always on the outside looking in. And then I started thinking, if something happened to one of the girls, the inheritance would be simpler. Ethan could be positioned better. He's brilliant, Thomas. He deserves opportunities. So, you hired someone to kidnap my 5-year-old daughter. Thomas's words were measured, deadly calm. To kill her. I didn't tell him to kill her. Patricia's composure shattered completely. I said, make her disappear. I thought he'd take her far away. Leave her with someone, I don't know. I didn't think about the details. I just wanted her gone. So Eleanor would what? Natalie demanded, tears streaming down her face. Fall apart, die of grief. Is that what you wanted? No. Patricia was sobbing now. I didn't know she would. I didn't think it would destroy her like that. I thought she'd grieve. Yes, but she still had you, Natalie. She still had Thomas. I thought she'd recover eventually. But she didn't, Laura said quietly. She died. Patricia looked at her, really looked at her, and something crumbled behind her eyes. When Eleanor died, I knew what I'd done. I knew it was my fault. I've lived with that guilt for 17 years. I tried to make amends, tried to be there for Thomas and Natalie, tried to cover your tracks, Detective Chen interjected. You stayed close to monitor the situation, to make sure nothing came back to you. Patricia didn't deny it. Ethan finally found his voice. All this time, you let me believe. He couldn't finish. He looked at his mother like she was a stranger. I defended you when people said you were too interested in Uncle Thomas's business, too involved in family finances. I defended you. I thought they were being paranoid. Ethan, please, don't. He held up a hand. Don't say my name, don't talk to me. One of the attorneys leaned forward. Mrs. Monroe, I strongly advise you to stop talking and request legal counsel. But Patricia seemed beyond caring. The dam had broken, and 20 years of guilt came flooding out. I never knew what happened to her, she said, looking at Laura. Raymond said he'd handled it. I gave him the second payment and told him I never wanted to hear about it again. For years. I assumed you were dead. I prayed you were dead because at least that meant you hadn't suffered. When I saw you at the restaurant, when I realized who you might be, her voice broke. I should have felt relieved. I should have been happy you were alive. But all I could think was that everything would come out, that I'd lose everything. So you tried to destroy her reputation, Thomas said. The press leak, the smear campaign, that was you. Patricia nodded miserably. I thought if I could make people doubt her, make them think she was a con artist, maybe she'd give up and disappear again. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back 20 years, Laura said. Her voice was remarkably steady, though her hands were shaking in her lap. Sorry doesn't bring back the mother I never got to know. Sorry doesn't give Natalie back her childhood with her twin sister. Natalie was crying openly now. How could you, Aunt Patricia? How could you do this to us? I don't know, Patricia whispered. I don't know what's wrong with me. The jealousy, the anger, it consumed me. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late to undo it. Thomas picked up his phone. Detective Chen, I assume you have enough for an arrest? Chen nodded grimly. More than enough, Mrs. Monroe. You have the right to remain silent. Wait. Laura stood abruptly. Everyone turned to look at her. Before you arrest her, I need to know something. She walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of Patricia. The man you hired, Raymond Price, did he hurt me before he left me in Philadelphia? Did he do anything to me? Patricia looked confused. No, he said you cried the whole drive, but he didn't touch you. He said he bought you food, tried to comfort you, but you were terrified. When he left you at the bus station, you were physically unharmed. Laura nodded slowly. Some small part of her relaxed at that confirmation, at least that mercy had been granted. One more thing, she said. Did you ever feel anything? Any regret? Any guilt? Or was it just fear of getting caught? Patricia met her eyes for a long moment. They stood there, the woman who'd ordered a child's death and the child who'd survived it. Every day, Patricia finally said, every single day for 20 years. I've thought about what I did. I'd see little girls Hannah's age and imagine what she'd look like. I'd see Eleanor's ghost in Natalie's face. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and hate myself. But hating yourself doesn't undo what you've done. And apparently, it doesn't stop you from doing more terrible things to cover it up. She closed her eyes. I'm a monster, I know that. I've known it for a long time. You're right, Laura said simply. You are a monster, but you're also pathetic, and I refuse to let you have any more power over my life. She turned to Thomas. Call the police. I want her arrested. I want her to face justice for what she did. Chen stood, pulling out handcuffs. Patricia Monroe, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Patricia didn't resist as Chen cuffed her. She looked small suddenly, diminished. Ethan watched, his face pale and expressionless. As Chen led Patricia toward the door, she stopped and turned back to Laura one last time. I hope you have a good life, she said quietly. The life I stole from you. I hope it's everything you deserve. Then she was gone, led away by Detective Chen and the waiting officers outside. The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas sank into his chair, looking 20 years older. Natalie was still crying, and Laura found herself moving to her sister's side, pulling her into an embrace. They held each other while Thomas buried his face in his hands. Ethan stood frozen by the window. Finally, he spoke, his voice hollow. I'm sorry for what she did. For what He swallowed hard. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, Thomas said tiredly. But you should go, Ethan. We need time to process this. Ethan nodded and left without another word. The attorneys began packing up their materials, speaking in low voices about next steps, court dates, media statements. Laura barely heard them. She felt strangely numb, like she was watching everything from a distance. Laura? Natalie's voice was small. Are you okay? Laura laughed, a sound without humor. I don't know. I don't know what okay is supposed to feel like right now. Thomas stood and crossed to them. Slowly, carefully, he wrapped his arms around both his daughters. We're going to get through this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. All three of us, together, as a family. For the first time in 20 years, that word, family, felt real to Laura. Broken, complicated, and scarred, but real. The arrest made headlines within hours. Society matriarch arrested in 20-year-old kidnapping case. Patricia Monroe charged in disappearance of Holloway heiress family betrayal. Sister-in-law allegedly ordered hit on 5-year-old Laura sat in Natalie's apartment. Phone turned off, avoiding the news alerts that kept trying to break through. Outside, reporters had camped on the sidewalk. Cameras ready, questions prepared. Inside, the silence felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. You should eat something, Natalie said, pushing a plate of untouched pasta across the counter. Laura looked at the food without interest. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday. Neither have you. They sat in silence. Two mirror images of exhaustion. Thomas had gone to meet with the attorneys. To begin the process of formal statements and legal proceedings, he'd asked if they wanted to come. Both had declined. Laura's phone, still off, sat between them like a third presence. When she finally turned it on, it exploded with notifications. Texts from Maria and other co-workers, voicemails from reporters, emails from people she'd never heard of offering book deals, movie rights, interviews, and one text that made her breath catch. Unknown, you destroyed my mother. I hope you're happy. Ethan? Natalie saw her face change. What is it? Laura showed her the text. Natalie's jaw tightened. He has no right. He just found out his mother is a monster, Laura said quietly. I get it. That doesn't give him the right to blame you, doesn't it? Laura set the phone down. If I'd never come back, if I'd just ignored you that day in the restaurant, Patricia would still be free, Ethan would still have his mother, and you'd still be living a lie, Natalie countered. Laura, none of this is your fault. You didn't ask to be kidnapped. You didn't ask to be abandoned in a bus station. You didn't ask for any of this. Laura knew Natalie was right. Logically, she knew it, but guilt didn't respond to logic. Her phone rang, a number she recognized. Detective Chen. Miss Bennett, I hope I'm not disturbing you. It's fine. What's going on? Patricia Monroe made a formal statement this morning. Full confession. Her attorney tried to stop her, but she insisted. Chen paused. She wants to see you. Laura's stomach dropped. What? She's asked if you'd be willing to visit her. Before the arraignment, she said she has things she needs to say to you directly. Absolutely not, Natalie said, having heard through the phone. Laura, you don't owe her anything. I know I don't owe her, Laura said slowly, but maybe I need to hear what she has to say. For myself. Laura, I need closure, Nat. I need to look her in the eye and hear the whole truth, not just what came out in front of lawyers and recorders. The real truth. Chen's voice came through the phone. I can arrange it if you're sure. It would be supervised. Of course, and you can leave at any time. Do it, Laura said, before she could change her mind. 2 hours later, she sat in a small, sterile room at the detention center, waiting. Natalie had insisted on coming, sitting beside her with arms crossed protectively. Thomas had wanted to come too, but Laura had asked him not to. Some conversations needed to happen without him. The door opened. Patricia entered, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to drain all the color from her face. She looked diminished without her designer clothes and perfect makeup. Human, breakable. She sat across from them, hands cuffed in front of her. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Thank you for coming, Patricia finally said. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't, Laura admitted. I wouldn't have blamed you. Patricia's voice was different, stripped of its usual hauteur. Raw and honest. I've been sitting in that cell, thinking about everything I want to say to you, everything I should have said 20 years ago, or 10 years ago, or even last week. And now that you're here, I don't know where to start. Start with the truth, Laura said. The whole truth. Why did you really do it? Patricia took a shaky breath. Jealousy, pure toxic jealousy. Eleanor and I grew up in the same house, wore the same clothes, went to the same schools, but somehow she was always the golden child. She got the praise, the attention, the opportunities. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd make my own way. But when my marriage fell apart, and I was struggling to raise Ethan alone, and Eleanor had everything, the loving husband, the beautiful home, the twin daughters, something in me just broke. So you tried to kill a child, Natalie said flatly. I tried to make one disappear, Patricia corrected, then stopped herself. No, that's not better. That's not an excuse. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to tell you that I knew it was wrong. Even when I was arranging it, even when I was withdrawing the money, even when I was giving Raymond Price his instructions, I knew, but I told myself it would work out somehow, that Hannah would end up with a nice family somewhere, that she'd have a good life, that it would all be okay. But you never checked, Laura said. You took the money you would have spent looking for me and you just lived your life. Yes, Patricia's voice broke, because checking would have meant admitting what I'd done, and I was too much of a coward for that. Did you ever think about me? Laura asked. In all those years, did you wonder if I was alive or dead, if I was happy or suffering? Patricia's face crumpled. Every day, every single day, I'd see little girls and think, is that what Hannah looks like now? I'd read stories about missing children and feel sick. When Eleanor died, I thought the guilt would kill me, but it didn't. I just kept living, kept pretending, kept lying. You came to family dinners, Natalie said, her voice shaking with anger. You celebrated holidays with us. You watched Dad fall apart, watched me grow up alone, and you said nothing. I know. You let us suffer for 20 years. I know. Patricia's composure finally shattered. She was crying now, shoulders shaking. I know what I did. I know what I am. There's no punishment severe enough for what I've done. There's no apology big enough. There's nothing I can say or do that will ever make this right. Then why am I here? Laura demanded. Why did you ask to see me if you know there's nothing you can say? Patricia looked up, mascara-stained face raw with emotion. Because I needed you to see me like this, not the polished society woman, not the concerned aunt, not the person I pretended to be. I needed you to see the real me. The monster who destroyed your family. The coward who let you grow up without a mother. The woman who has to live with this for the rest of her life. You want me to feel sorry for you? Laura realized. No, Patricia shook her head. I want you to see that there are consequences. Real consequences. I wanted you to know that I'm not getting away with this. That justice is being done. And I wanted to tell you, face to face, that what happened to you wasn't your fault. It was mine. All mine. You were an innocent child who got caught in the crossfire of my jealousy and spite. Laura sat back, processing. Part of her wanted to scream, to rage, to make Patricia hurt the way she'd been hurt. But another part, the part that had been raised by Grace, who'd taught her about mercy and forgiveness, felt something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but maybe understanding. Understanding that Patricia was human, flawed, broken in her own way. I can't forgive you, Laura said finally. Not now. Maybe not ever. I don't expect you to. But I want you to know something. Laura leaned forward. You took 20 years from me. You took my mother, my sister, my father. You took my childhood and my identity. But you didn't break me. Grace made sure of that. She loved me, raised me, taught me how to be strong. And now I have my family back. I have Natalie and Thomas. I have a future. You tried to destroy my life and you failed. Something like relief crossed Patricia's face. Good. That's good. You deserve happiness, Hannah. Laura, you deserve everything. Don't, Laura said sharply. Don't try to make yourself feel better by being supportive now. You don't get to do that. Patricia nodded, accepting the rebuke. The guard knocked on the door. Time's up. As Patricia stood to leave, she paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad Grace found you. I'm glad you had someone who loved you. Her name was Grace Bennett, Laura said. And she was more of a mother to me in 15 years than you ever could have been in a lifetime. Patricia nodded once, then let the guard lead her away. In the silence that followed, Natalie reached for Laura's hand. You okay? I don't know, Laura admitted, but I think I will be, eventually. They sat there for a moment longer, then stood to leave. As they walked out of the detention center, past the reporters and cameras, Laura felt something shift inside her. The anger was still there. The grief was still there. But so was something else. Freedom. She was finally free. The courtroom was packed. Laura sat between Thomas and Natalie in the front row, acutely aware of the cameras, the whispers, the eyes boring into the back of her head. Patricia's arraignment had drawn media from across the country. The story had everything. Wealth, betrayal, a missing child found after 20 years. Patricia entered in handcuffs, her lawyer beside her. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her crimes. When her eyes found Laura's across the room, something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not quite, but acknowledgement. The judge read the charges: conspiracy to commit kidnapping, child endangerment, obstruction of justice. Each word landed like a hammer blow. How does the defendant plead? Patricia's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea of guilty to all charges. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Monroe, do you understand that by pleading guilty, you waive your right to a trial, that you will be sentenced based on these charges? Patricia nodded. I understand, Your Honor. I'm guilty. I've been guilty for 20 years. I don't want to drag this out. I don't want to make the Holloway family relive this nightmare in a trial. I just want to accept responsibility for what I've done. The judge studied her for a long moment. Very well. Sentencing is scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Until then, the defendant will remain in custody. Bail is denied. As they led Patricia away, she turned one last time. Her eyes found Laura's again. And this time, Laura saw something she hadn't expected. Relief. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Thomas's security team formed a barrier, but the questions came anyway, shouted over shoulders and microphones thrust forward. Laura, how do you feel about Patricia's guilty plea? Will you attend the sentencing? Do you forgive her? Thomas kept walking, one arm protectively around each daughter. They didn't stop until they were safely in the car, doors locked, privacy glass raised. In the silence, Natalie let out a shaky breath. It's really over. Not yet, Thomas said. Sentencing is still 3 weeks away. But yes, the worst is behind us. Laura stared out the window at the city passing by. She'd lived in New York her whole remembered life, but it looked different now, like she was seeing it through new eyes, Hannah's eyes. I want to go to Grace's grave, she said suddenly. Thomas and Natalie both turned to look at her. Now, Natalie asked. Now. The cemetery in Queens was quiet, a pocket of peace amid the city's chaos. Laura led them to a simple headstone near a large oak tree. Grace Eleanor Bennett, 1945, 2023. Beloved mother Laura knelt, fingers tracing the engraved letters. I never told her the truth, she said softly. About the dreams, about the garden, about feeling like I didn't quite fit anywhere. I think she knew, though. I think she always knew there was something I was missing. Thomas knelt beside her, reading the headstone. Grace Eleanor, he repeated. Eleanor was my wife's name. Laura looked up. I know. I looked it up after I found out who I was. The coincidence seemed too strange. Maybe it wasn't a coincidence, Natalie said, kneeling on Laura's other side. Maybe Grace knew somehow. Maybe she named herself that way in the records to leave a clue, in case anyone ever came looking. Or maybe, Laura said, it was just the universe trying to tell me something, that even when I was lost, I was still connected to my real family. They sat in silence for a while. 3 people connected by loss and love and the strange twists of fate. Finally, Laura spoke again. Grace taught me something important. She used to say that forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger and hate. She said carrying grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Are you saying you forgive Patricia? Thomas asked carefully. No, Laura shook her head. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'm saying I don't want to carry this hatred around for the rest of my life. Patricia's going to prison. She's going to pay for what she did. That has to be enough. Natalie took Laura's hand. You're a better person than I am. I don't think I can forgive her. You don't have to, Laura said. Forgiveness is personal. It's something I need to do for myself. But you're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to never forgive her. That's your choice. Thomas cleared his throat, emotion thick in his voice. Your mother, Eleanor, would be so proud of the woman you've become, both of you. You've handled this with more grace than I ever could have. We learned from the best, Natalie said, squeezing her father's shoulder. They stayed at the grave a while longer, Laura telling Grace about everything that had happened, about finding her family, about finally knowing who she was. It felt important to tell her, even if Grace couldn't hear, even if she'd known all along. As they stood to leave, Laura noticed an envelope tucked behind the headstone, held down by a small rock. Her name was written on it in handwriting she didn't recognize. What's that? Natalie asked. Laura picked it up carefully and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photo showed Grace as a younger woman, maybe 50, standing outside a small house with a little girl, Laura, on her shoulders. Both were laughing. The letter was short. Dear Laura, if you're reading this, it means you found out the truth. I always knew you would eventually. I saw it in your eyes. That searching, that sense of something missing. I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid of losing you, afraid of disrupting the life we'd built together. When I found you at that bus station, I knew immediately something was wrong. No 5-year-old appears out of nowhere without trauma, without someone looking for them. I tried to find your family. I truly did. But after months of dead ends, I made a choice. I chose to keep you, to raise you, to love you as my own. Was it selfish, maybe? But you needed someone, and I needed you too. My own daughter had died 3 years earlier, and you filled a hole in my heart I didn't think could ever be filled. I named myself Eleanor as a middle name when I officially adopted you because I'd read about the Holloway case. I followed it for years, hoping they'd find Hannah, hoping you'd find your way home, but I also hoped you'd stay with me. Selfish again? I know. I'm writing this now because I'm sick, and I know I don't have much time left. If you find your real family after I'm gone, please know that I loved you. You were my daughter in every way that mattered, and I hope I gave you enough love to carry you through whatever comes next. Also know this: whatever happened to you, whoever took you, it wasn't your fault. You were innocent. You are innocent, and you deserve all the happiness in the world, all my love." Grace Laura's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the letter. Tears streamed down her face as she read it again. Then again. "She knew," Laura whispered. "She knew who I was. And she kept me anyway." Natalie read over her shoulder, her own eyes filling. "She loved you. She saved me," Laura corrected. "Patricia tried to destroy me, but Grace saved me. She gave me a childhood, a home, love. She gave me everything." Thomas pulled both his daughters into an embrace. "Then we owe her everything too. Without Grace, we might never have gotten you back." They stood there in the cemetery, holding each other, mourning Grace, and celebrating her at the same time. The woman who'd found a lost child and loved her, despite knowing she belonged to someone else. The woman who'd given Laura 15 years of happiness, even while carrying the secret that might tear them apart. "I want to do something for her," Laura said when they finally pulled apart. "A memorial or a foundation or something. She spent her whole life helping people, volunteering, fostering children, giving what little she had to those who had less. She deserves to be remembered. We'll do it together," Thomas said. "The Grace Bennett Foundation, for children who've been lost, displaced, separated from their families. We'll help them the way Grace helped you," Laura nodded, wiping her tears. She'd like that. As they walked back to the car, Laura took one last look at the headstone. In her mind, she heard Grace's voice, the gentle wisdom she'd carried through Laura's childhood. "Forgiveness isn't about them, sweetheart. It's about you. It's about choosing peace over pain." Laura closed her eyes and made a choice. She thought of Patricia sitting in that cell, destroyed by her own actions. She thought of the 20 years stolen from her, from Natalie, from Thomas. She thought of Eleanor, who died, never knowing her daughter was alive, and she chose to let it go, not to forget, not to excuse, but to release the grip of hatred, to refuse to let Patricia's crimes define the rest of her life. "I forgive her," Laura whispered to the wind, to Grace, to herself, not because she deserves it, but because I do. Beside her, Natalie squeezed her hand. "You're the bravest person I know," Laura squeezed back. "I learned from Grace, and now I'm learning from you, from Dad, from this family I thought I'd never have." Thomas put his arms around both of them. "Let's go home." And for the first time in 20 years, Laura knew exactly where home was. 3 months later, Laura stood in the foyer of the Holloway estate, watching movers carry boxes up the curved staircase. Her belongings from the tiny studio apartment looked almost comical in this grand space. Secondhand furniture, mismatched dishes, worn books that had been her constant companions. "You don't have to keep any of that, you know," Thomas said gently, appearing beside her. "We can furnish your room with anything you want." "New everything." Laura shook her head. "These things are mine. They're part of who I was, who I am. I don't want to erase Laura Bennett just because I'm also Hannah Holloway." Thomas smiled, understanding in his eyes. "Then we'll make room for both." The past 3 months had been a whirlwind. Patricia's sentencing, 20 years in prison with possibility of parole after 12. The media frenzy that followed, the endless interviews, the book offers, the constant scrutiny through it all. Laura had insisted on maintaining some semblance of normalcy. She'd kept working at Hope Garden for the first month, despite Thomas's protests, not because she needed the money. Her trust fund alone could have supported her for several lifetimes, but because she needed the anchor. Maria and the other servers had been her family when she had no one else. She wasn't ready to let that go completely. Eventually, though, she'd given her notice, not to become a lady of leisure, but to pursue something that mattered. The Grace Bennett Foundation. "The contractor called," Natalie said, coming down the stairs with her tablet. "The community center on the Lower East Side is perfect. 3 floors, accessible location, room for offices, counseling spaces, even a small apartment for emergency placements." Laura looked at the floor plans on the tablet. The foundation had become her passion project, a place where displaced children, runaways, and families torn apart could find help. Legal aid, family reunification services, counseling, temporary housing, Everything Grace would have wanted. "When can we start renovations?" Laura asked. "Next week, if you approve the budget." Approved? Laura didn't even look at the numbers. Thomas had taught her about finances over the past months, had shown her how the family business worked, but he'd also taught her that some things were worth any price. "You're getting the hang of this whole heiress thing," Natalie teased, but her smile was warm. "Don't get used to it," Laura shot back. "I still clip coupons." They'd fallen into an easy rhythm, the sisters, learning each other's quirks, discovering the ways they were similar and different. They both still touched their right earlobes when nervous. Both hated cilantro. Both had the same laugh, a fact that had made Thomas cry the first time he heard them laughing together. But Laura was quieter, more cautious. 20 years of uncertainty had made her that way. Natalie was bolder, more confident, the product of privilege and security. They complemented each other, filled in each other's gaps. "Dad wants us in his study at 4, Natalie said. "He has something to show us." At 4 o'clock sharp, they gathered in Thomas's book-lined study. He stood by the window, looking more relaxed than Laura had ever seen him. The weight he'd carried for 20 years had lifted, leaving behind a man who could finally breathe. "I wanted to show you both something," he said, pulling out a wooden box from his desk drawer. "I've been holding on to these for a long time." Inside the box were photographs, dozens of them. Laura and Natalie as babies, as toddlers, as 5-year-olds. But there were also newer photos, ones Laura had never seen. "I had an investigator take these," Thomas admitted quietly. "After we got the DNA results, before Patricia was arrested, I wanted to document who you'd become. Laura, the woman Grace had raised. I have pictures of you at work, at the grocery store, walking through the park. I know it sounds invasive. It sounds like a father who missed 20 years. Laura interrupted gently. "Can I see them?" They spent the next hour going through photographs. Thomas telling stories about baby Hannah, about the mischief the twins used to get into, then looking at the recent photos. Laura filling in her own stories. The day she'd graduated from community college. The time she'd burned dinner so badly the fire alarm went off. Small moments that made up a life. "I wish Eleanor could see this," Thomas said softly, touching a photo of Laura and Natalie laughing together at a coffee shop. One of the surveillance photos. "She'd be so happy. Tell me about her," Laura said. "Not the grief, not the aftermath. Tell me about who she was before." Thomas's face softened. She was brilliant, funny. She could light up a room just by walking into it. She loved gardening. That's why we had so many roses. She used to say that raising flowers was easier than raising children because flowers actually stayed where you planted them. Natalie laughed wetly. "She said that about us specifically. We were always running off." "She sang constantly," Thomas continued. "That French lullaby you remembered, Laura. She sang it every night. Even when you girls were too old for lullabies, she'd still hum it while tucking you in." "What was she like as a mother?" Laura asked, needing to know. Patient, kind, firm when she needed to be, but always fair. She believed in natural consequences. If you didn't want to wear a coat, fine, but you'd be cold. She taught you both to be independent, to think for yourselves. Thomas smiled at the memory. "She would have loved who you've become. Laura, both of you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Thomas pulled out one more item from the box. A letter, sealed in an envelope yellowed with age. "Eleanor wrote this the night before she died," he said, his voice thick. "She was sick. She knew the end was coming, and she asked me to give it to Hannah if she ever came home. I've carried it with me every day since." With shaking hands, Laura took the envelope. Her name, Hannah, was written on the front in elegant script. She opened it carefully and began to read. "My darling Hannah, if you're reading this, it means a miracle happened. It means you found your way home, or perhaps home found you. I don't know where you are as I write this. I don't know if you're happy or sad, safe or scared. I've spent every day of the last 17 years wondering, hoping, praying. The not knowing has been the hardest part. But I need you to know some things. First, none of this was your fault. Whatever happened, wherever you went, you were a victim, an innocent child caught in something terrible. Never blame yourself. Second, I loved you, I love you still. Wherever you are, whatever name you go by now, you are my daughter. That bond can never be broken. Not by time, not by distance, not even by death. Third, I hope you've been happy. I hope whoever had you, wherever you ended up, you were loved, you were cared for, you were given the childhood you deserved, because you deserve everything beautiful in this world. I'm sorry I won't be there when you come home. I'm sorry I didn't have the strength to wait for you. But your father and your sister, they're strong. They'll take care of you. They'll love you the way I would have. Be kind to yourself, Hannah. Be kind to them. Family is complicated and messy and sometimes broken, but it's worth fighting for. I carried you in my heart every single day. I'll carry you into whatever comes next. All my love, forever and always. Mom Laura's tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink slightly. Natalie was crying too, and even Thomas had tears streaming down his face. She knew, Laura whispered. She knew she'd never see me again. But she still hoped. She never stopped hoping, Thomas said. Right up until the end, Laura carefully folded the letter and held it to her chest. I wish I could have known her. You did, Natalie said softly. In Grace. Grace gave you everything Mom would have given you. Love, strength, kindness. You knew her through Grace. It was true, Laura realized. Grace had embodied all the things Eleanor had written about. The patience, the love, the belief that Laura deserved happiness. In a strange way, she'd had two mothers. Both had loved her completely. Both had wanted the best for her. I want to visit Mom's grave, Laura said. Tomorrow, I want to tell her I'm home. We'll go together. Thomas agreed. That evening, Laura stood in her new room at the estate, Hannah's old room, which Thomas had kept exactly as it was. Twin bed with pink sheets, stuffed animals lined up on shelves, a bookcase full of children's books. Natalie appeared in the doorway. You don't have to keep it like this, you know? You can redecorate however you want. Laura looked around at the frozen-in-time shrine to a 5-year-old who no longer existed. I think I'll keep some of it, the bookcase maybe, but add some of my things too. Make it mine, make it ours. Ours? Well, yeah, you're my twin sister. You're going to be in here constantly, right? Natalie grinned. Obviously, we have 20 years of sleepovers to make up for. They spent the evening unpacking Laura's boxes, mixing old with new, creating a space that honored both who she'd been and who she was becoming. On the bookshelf, children's books sat next to Laura's worn college textbooks. On the walls, photos of Grace hung beside pictures of the Holloway family. As Laura finally climbed into bed that night, Natalie sprawled in a chair nearby, refusing to leave. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Complete. Not just Laura Bennett, the girl who'd been found. Not just Hannah Holloway, the girl who'd been lost. But both, a whole person, finally home. The garden was exactly as Laura had dreamed it. Pink roses climbed white trellises, their petals soft in the late April breeze. A stone path wound between carefully tended beds of tulips and daffodils. The fountain, the one Thomas had drained 21 years ago, now sparkled in the afternoon sun, water dancing in the light. He'd had it restored for today. For their 26th birthday, Laura stood at the garden's entrance, taking it all in. Beside her, Natalie squeezed her hand. Do you remember? Natalie asked softly. Pieces, Laura admitted. The smell of the roses, the sound of the water, you laughing as we ran down that path, she smiled. Some things the mind forgets, but the heart remembers. They walked together down the stone path, their matching dresses, Laura's choice, not Natalie's usual style, but she'd worn it anyway, flowing in the spring air. At the end of the path, beneath the large oak tree Laura had seen in countless dreams, Thomas waited. He wore a dark suit, but his expression was soft, almost vulnerable. In his hands, he held a small wooden box. 26 years ago today, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I stood in this garden with 2 5-year-old girls. I gave them each a ring and told them they were 2 parts of one soul, that no matter what happened, they'd always have each other. He opened the box. Inside, nestled on velvet, were 2 new rings, not replacements for the ones they wore. Those would stay on their fingers forever. but companions to them, delicate bands of white gold, each engraved with a date, April 2nd, and 2 names intertwined, Hannah and Natalie. 3 hours after I gave you those first rings, I lost one of you, Thomas continued, his voice breaking slightly. I spent 20 years believing I'd failed as a father, that I'd let my daughter disappear into nothing, but she didn't disappear. She became Laura. She was saved by a woman with a heart big enough to love a stranger's child. She grew into someone extraordinary. Laura felt tears sliding down her cheeks. And now, Thomas said, looking between his daughters, you're both here, both whole, both mine. These rings are a promise, that I'll never lose either of you again, that we're a family, broken and mended, but stronger for it. He held out the rings. Laura and Natalie each took one, sliding them onto their left hands to complement the amethyst hearts on their right. Perfect, Natalie whispered, looking at how the bands caught the light. There's one more thing, Thomas said. He gestured toward the house, where staff had set up a small table with champagne and a birthday cake. But first, I need to tell you both something. They sat on the bench beneath the oak, the same bench from Laura's dreams, and Thomas pulled out his phone. I got a call yesterday from Detective Chen, Raymond Price, the man who took you, Laura. He had a safety deposit box. Inside were detailed records, dates, locations, everything, including a recording he made years ago. A confession more complete than the letter. Laura tensed. What did it say? That Patricia paid him $50,000. That she told him to make you disappear permanently. That he was supposed to... Thomas stopped, unable to say it. To kill me, Laura finished quietly. Yes, but he also described you. How you cried for me, for your mother, for Natalie. How you kept touching your ring and saying you wanted to go home. How something in him broke when he looked at you, and he couldn't do it. So he drove you to Philadelphia instead, bought you food, tried to calm you down. Then he watched from a distance until Grace found you. He saved me, Laura said, the realization settling over her. In his own way, he saved me. He did. And his recording makes it clear that Patricia gave explicit instructions. The prosecutor is adding attempted murder to her charges. She'll likely spend the rest of her life in prison. Natalie closed her eyes. Good. There's more, Thomas said. The recording also revealed that Patricia wasn't working alone initially. She'd discussed her plans with someone, a business associate who talked her into it, who said it would be easy, that children disappeared all the time. Laura's blood ran cold. Who? A man named Marcus Webb. He died 10 years ago, so he can't be prosecuted. But Chen wanted us to know. He wanted us to have all the pieces. They sat in silence, absorbing this final piece of the puzzle. Patricia hadn't been entirely alone in her evil. Someone had encouraged it, enabled it. The knowledge didn't make it better, but it made it more complete. I've made a decision, Thomas said finally, about the business, about my legacy. I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations, promoting my CFO to CEO. I want to spend time with you both. Real time, not stolen moments between meetings. I've lost enough years. Dad, you don't have to... Natalie started. I want to, he interrupted. I'm 50 years old. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and I have 2 daughters I barely know. That's going to change. Laura felt something warm bloom in her chest. What will you do? Help you run the foundation? If you'll have me, Grace devoted her life to helping people. I'd like to honor that, honor her, and spend time with the daughter she raised. He looked at Laura. If that's okay with you, more than okay. Laura managed through tears. They sat together as the afternoon sun shifted, painting the garden in gold and amber. Eventually, they moved to the table, where Thomas cut the birthday cake, chocolate with raspberry filling, which had been both girls' favorite as children and, coincidentally, was still Laura's favorite now. To 26 years, Thomas said, raising his champagne glass. 21 years of searching, 5 years of miracles, and hopefully 50 more years of this together. To family, Natalie added. To Grace, Laura said softly, for making this possible. They drank, ate cake, and talked as the sun began to set. Thomas told more stories about Eleanor, about the twins' early years. Natalie shared memories of growing up alone, of always feeling like something was missing. Laura talked about Grace, about the woman who'd given her everything despite owing her nothing. As twilight settled over the garden, Laura stood and walked to the fountain. The water sparkled with the last rays of sun, creating tiny rainbows in the spray. She reached up and touched the amethyst ring on her right hand, the ring that had started everything. "Strange, isn't it?" Natalie said, appearing beside her. "How something so small could carry so much weight. If you hadn't been wearing that ring, if I hadn't noticed it, we would have found each other eventually," Laura said with certainty. "Maybe not that day, maybe not that way, but we would have. Some things are meant to be." Natalie held up her own right hand, the matching ring gleaming. "Two parts of one soul, two parts of one soul," Laura echoed. They stood there, hands joined, rings touching, as the fountain splashed and the roses released their evening fragrance. Behind them, Thomas watched his daughters, both of them, finally both of them, and felt the weight of 20 years lift completely. This was what Eleanor had wanted, what she'd hoped for in that final letter. Family, reunited, love, restored, the broken pieces carefully mended. "Dad," Natalie called, "come take a picture with us." Thomas joined them by the fountain, wrapping an arm around each daughter as the estate photographer captured the moment. Two young women and their father. Three people bound by blood and love and the stubborn refusal to give up hope. Laura felt it. Peace. Not the absence of pain or the erasure of the past, but the presence of something stronger. Acceptance. Belonging. Home. She thought of Grace, who'd found a lost child and loved her anyway. Of Eleanor, who'd held on to hope even in death. Of Thomas, who'd searched for 20 years and never stopped believing. Of Natalie, who'd recognized her other half in a stranger's face. And she thought of herself. Laura Bennett, who'd survived abandonment and built a life from nothing. Hannah Holloway, who'd been stolen but never truly lost. Both identities, both lives, both names, all part of who she was. The rings on her fingers caught the last light of day, the old and the new, the past and the future, the promise and the proof. Some things, Laura realized, were worth waiting 20 years for. Some broken things could be mended. Some lost things could be found. And some love was strong enough to survive anything, even time, even distance, even death. As the stars began to appear above the garden, Laura looked at her sister, at her father, at the home she'd found after 2 decades of searching. "I'm home," she whispered, and for the first time since she was 5 years old, she meant it completely. The amethyst hearts gleamed in the twilight, 2 rings that had spent 20 years apart, now reunited at last. A promise kept, a miracle delivered, a family, broken and mended, but whole again. The fountain splashed, the roses bloomed, and in the garden where it had all begun, 3 people stood together, finally complete, home.
Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Hopefully every moment, every detail in the story has brought you emotions, thoughts, and maybe a little joy or motivation. Thank you for spending time with us, and hope that the next stories will continue to accompany you and touch your heart.